In the shadowed corridors of wealth and power, some men stand tall not because they are kind, but because they are feared. Nathaniel Crane was one such man. CEO of Crane Tech Industries. He had built his empire with steel nerves and an iron heart. No one dared question him. Employees whispered about his temper, his ruthlessness, how he could crush a career with a glance and never flinch. And then, one winter evening, Nathaniel Crane collapsed. It happened during a board meeting. His assistant, a woman too afraid to meet his eyes, had just placed his black coffee beside him. He took one sip, set the cup down, and suddenly, as if a silent hand had wrapped around his throat, Nathaniel's breath hitched. His skin turned pale, his pupils dilated, and before anyone could speak, he crumpled to the floor. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Cameras flashed as paramedics wheeled his unconscious form into the nearest clinic. It was an odd choice, a small facility on the outskirts of town, not the luxurious private hospital someone like him would usually be taken to. But the roads were blocked due to the snowstorm that had begun to sweep the city. The clinic was the only accessible option. Snow fell heavily as the automatic doors swung open and the cold wind howled in behind them. The nurse at the desk jumped up. She wasn't expecting an emergency this late at night. Unconscious male, no response, possible cardiac episode. The paramedic barked. "Take him to room 3, she directed, her voice firm, calm. Almost too calm. As the gurney rolled past her, the nurse's eyes met Nathaniel's face. Her breath caught. Her fingers tightened around the chart in her hand, the plastic creaking under her grip. For a moment, something dark flickered behind her eyes. Recognition, anger, maybe something more. But she said nothing. 3 hours later, Nathaniel Crane awoke to a beeping monitor and a blinding white ceiling. The room smelled like antiseptic and old walls. He blinked several times, trying to process what had happened. His chest ached. A dull throb echoed in his skull. He reached up, massaging his temple, then noticed the 4 line in his arm. He hated hospitals. He turned to the side and froze. Standing at the edge of the room, watching him silently, was a woman in scrubs. Her face was partially hidden by a surgical mask, but her eyes, those eyes, they were familiar. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice scratchy, more vulnerable than he liked. "You're safe," she said quietly, checking his vitals without meeting his gaze. "You fainted. They brought you here." He tried to sit up, but she gently pushed him back. Her hand was cool, firm, and familiar, unnervingly so. "I know you," he said slowly, narrowing his eyes. "What's your name?" She paused, fingers tightening on the monitor. "Don't worry about that now, Mr. Crane. You need to rest." But Nathaniel's mind, ever sharp even through the fog, was already spinning. He knew that voice, even if it was softer now. Years ago, he had heard that voice tremble, just once, when he fired her in front of an entire office floor. "No," he whispered, sitting up despite her protest. "You were at my company. You were Rebecca. Rebecca Hart." She didn't deny it. She stepped back, the faintest smile creeping under the mask. "I see you haven't lost your memory. Or your arrogance." A chill ran down Nathaniel's spine. He remembered now. Rebecca Hart, bright, passionate, a junior developer who had once confronted him about the company's unethical practices. She had embarrassed him in a meeting, made him look weak in front of the board. So he made an example out of her. Fired her publicly. Security had escorted her out as she cried. That had been 3 years ago. "You're a nurse now?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "I do many things," she replied vaguely. "Helping people. Healing them, sometimes." Nathaniel didn't like the way she said that. Her voice held a strange detachment, like a doll's, too smooth, too polite. He sat up straighter. The monitors beeped faster. "I want to speak to the hospital administrator," he barked. "You're not in a hospital, Mr. Crane," she said gently. He blinked. "What?" "This is a private clinic. Remote. Not under any major hospital network. The snowstorms cut off all the roads. No signal either. You're here for the night. Nathaniel picked up his phone. No bars. He suddenly realized how quiet everything was. No hallway chatter. No other patients. Just the wind outside and the occasional creak of old floorboards. I don't want you near me, he snapped. Get me another nurse. Rebecca tilted her head. There is no one else. Midnight. Nathaniel tried to sleep, but a soft knock at the door pulled him from uneasy dreams. Rebecca stood there, holding a tray. Soup. Doctor's orders. I'm not hungry, he growled. She stepped in anyway, setting the tray down. Then she turned to him, eyes locked. Do you remember what you said to me the day you fired me? He stiffened. I don't recall. I do. She stepped closer. You said, you'll never make it anywhere. You don't have what it takes. She reached into her pocket and placed something on the table beside the soup. It was her old employee badge. Scuffed, cracked, and burned at the edges. I kept it. Thought I'd remind myself what it's like to be humiliated. Nathaniel's throat went dry. I made a mistake, he said flatly, trying to regain control. No, she whispered. You made many. Later that night, the lights flickered. Power fluctuation. The backup generator kicked in, casting an eerie orange glow through the room. Nathaniel sat up again, heart pounding. There were whispers, faint from the hallway. Children's laughter. Then a screaming. He pushed the call button. No one came. He slid out of bed, for stand dragging beside him. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Deserted. The walls were lined with peeling paint and old photos, black and white images of nurses and patients. But all their eyes were scratched out. He stumbled down the corridor. At the far end, he saw a room with a single flickering light. The door creaked open on its own. Inside there was a hospital bed. On it lay another version of himself, pale, mouth open, dead eyes staring at the ceiling. He gasped and backed away. A mirror beside the bed showed not his reflection, but Rebecca standing behind him. He spun around. No one there. Then he heard the whisper again. You said I was nothing. Nathaniel stumbled back from the room with a corpse. His own face, lifeless, staring at the ceiling. The flickering light cast deep shadows across the walls, making the place feel less like a clinic and more like a decaying asylum. He tried to convince himself it was a hallucination, maybe from medication, maybe from stress. But the hallway was changing. Felt wrong. Longer than before. Colder. The air itself seemed to pulse. He looked back, expecting to see the door he came through, but it had vanished. The entire hallway had shifted. He wasn't in a clinic anymore. 2 hours earlier, in a different part of the building, one no longer on any architectural blueprint, Rebecca stood before an old mirror, whispering something in a language older than any she should have known. Behind her, the shadows on the wall shimmered. Something was waking up. Something that had been sleeping for a long, long time. Rebecca pulled out a lock of Nathaniel's hair from the pillowcase she'd changed earlier and dropped it into a bowl of black liquid. The moment it touched the surface, the liquid hissed and turned red. She closed her eyes. You took everything from me, she murmured. Now I'll take you. Nathaniel turned a corner and found himself in what looked like the main lobby, but everything was aged. The receptionist's desk was dusty, the computer missing, and a large grandfather clock stood in its place, ticking slowly backward. The air grew heavy. He couldn't breathe. On the far side of the room was a large board labeled Patients Under Care. He staggered toward it. There was only one name on the list. Nathaniel Crane, Room 3. Status. Pending transition. Pending what? He whispered, heart hammering. Suddenly behind him the old phone on the desk rang. He jumped, nearly falling. It rang again. And again. He reached out with a trembling hand and lifted the receiver. Static. Then a voice. Familiar. Do you know how many nights I cried, Mr. Crane? Rebecca, you ruined more than just my career. You ruined my mind. He slammed the phone down. The moment he did, the walls bled. Thick, black ooze trickled from the ceiling corners and light fixtures, dripping onto the floor. The tiles beneath his feet began to rot away. He turned to run, but found Rebecca standing there. Not the gentle nurse from earlier. This Rebecca wore the same badge she'd slammed on his office desk 3 years ago, but her eyes were hollow, mouth twisted in a grim smile. "Time to finish your checkup," she whispered. Flashback 3 years ago. Rebecca sat in her tiny apartment, shaking. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Calls from creditors, final warnings from landlords. After Nathaniel fired her, she'd been blacklisted by every major company. His influence was far-reaching. She couldn't get hired anywhere. Couldn't even walk into a tech firm without being laughed out of the lobby. Desperate, she turned to nursing. Something to survive. But hatred festered in her. Not just for the man who ruined her, but for the system that allowed it. She studied harder, worked night shifts, and slowly, something inside her cracked. She'd always been sensitive to things. Dreams that came true. Voices that whispered things before they happened. Now those whispers grew louder. They promised revenge. All she had to do was listen. Rebecca guided Nathaniel down a hallway he didn't recognize, even though it should have led to the exit. "There's no one else here," he muttered. "No staff. No patients. We take only one at a time," she replied. "Special treatment." "I'm leaving," he growled. Rebecca stopped. "You already did once. What the hell are you talking about?" She turned, her face inches from his. "Your heart stopped for 6 minutes, Mr. Crane. You were dead." He staggered back. No, I woke up. You saved me." "I brought you back," she corrected. "But something came with you." Suddenly alarms blared. The walls flickered, revealing ghostly outlines of people trapped inside. Faces pressed against the walls, eyes wide with terror. Nathaniel screamed and backed into a door. It opened. Inside the room. It was an operating theater, but ancient. Rusted tools hung from hooks. The surgical lights sparked. Strapped to the table was another version of Nathaniel. But this one was crying, screaming. "Please," the bound man sobbed. "Don't let her take me." The real Nathaniel backed away, gripping his head. "What is this?" Rebecca stepped into the room, now wearing an old nurse's uniform from decades ago. It was stained with something dark and moving. She whispered in a language he didn't understand, and the bound Nathaniel began to convulse. Black veins spiderwebbed across his skin. From the shadows, something huge moved. Figure. Unseen, but its presence filled the room. Rebecca smiled. "He's not the first. You won't be the last. I just wanted you to see." The walls peeled back, revealing rows of rooms. In each, a different version of Nathaniel lived out a different punishment. In one, he was being fired from a job. In another, he begged for change on the street, and in another, he was in a coffin, screaming, nails scratching at the lid as it closed. "No," Nathaniel whispered. He turned to Rebecca, but she was gone. The doors all slammed shut. And then silence. Nathaniel woke up in his hospital bed again, gasping. It was daylight outside. The room was clean. A different nurse stood beside him. "You fainted, sir. They brought you in last night. Clinic's back to normal now, the storm's past." He blinked. Where's Rebecca?" "Rebecca." The nurse frowned. "I don't know anyone here by that name." He looked at the wall. The photo of staff members from the 1950s still hung there. In the center was Rebecca. Younger. Smiling. Wearing the same nurse's uniform as last night. Nathaniel's heart dropped. He wasn't out. Not yet. Not ever. Nathaniel left the clinic that morning with shaking hands and a mind clouded in dread. The nurses said he had been unconscious for only a few hours. That he was lucky. But he couldn't shake the weight of what he'd seen, what he'd felt. Rebecca's face haunted him. Not just in memory but in windows. Reflections. In the murmurs of crowds that fell silent as he passed. She was watching. Somewhere. The car ride back to his penthouse was slow. The city looked different. The skyscrapers felt taller. The streets emptier. Time moved wrong, as though he were a character stuck between seconds. His driver turned to speak. "Rough night, sir." Nathaniel nodded. "Just get me home." The driver smiled. But there was something in that smile. Familiarity. A small scar on the lip, just like hers. Nathaniel blinked. It was Rebecca. He screamed. But the seat was empty. He was alone. 2 weeks later. Nathaniel hadn't been outside since the clinic. He disconnected from work. Emails unanswered. Stock meetings missed. His business empire continued without him, as if the world had finally decided it didn't need him anymore. He stared out at the city, pale and withdrawn. Every night the dreams returned. Rebecca, standing at the foot of his bed, holding a syringe. Rebecca in his office, watching as he signed her termination letter. Her eyes empty, but lips curled in a knowing grin. Rebecca whispering in his ear. "You can't fire someone you need." He started seeing things. The mirror in his bathroom didn't show him anymore. Showed her. Staring back, whispering without moving her lips. His phone rang at 3:33 a.m. every night. No caller ID. He finally answered it. "Why me?" he whispered. The voice on the other end wasn't Rebecca's. It was his. "Because you were already dead the day you fired her." 3 years ago. Nathaniel's office was lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. His empire glimmered beneath. Rebecca stood before him, clutching a tablet with trembling fingers. "I found a data leak," she'd said. "Someone inside is selling user info. I tracked it." He barely looked up. "Submit it to IT." "That's not your job." "I did. But they're ignoring it." Nathaniel sighed. "You've overstepped your role again." "I'm trying to protect the company." He waved her off. "You're dismissed, Rebecca. You're too emotional. Unstable." She froze. "Excuse me. I'm letting you go." She stepped forward. "You need me." "I don't need anyone who thinks they're smarter than protocol. Leave before I have security escort you out." She dropped her badge on his desk and left. Later that night he shredded her report. The leaker was one of his golf buddies. Too powerful to lose. She was never heard from again. Till now. Nathaniel woke on the floor of his penthouse living room. He didn't remember falling asleep. Something was wrong. The TV turned on by itself. Showed static. Then a video. A hallway. Dim. Familiar. Clinic. Camera panned slowly. Rebecca stood at the end of the corridor, her back to the screen. He turned around. Her eyes were black. She pointed at the screen, and the TV exploded. Nathaniel screamed, shielding himself from the shower of glass. The power went out. He stood up, bloody, trembling. And then, the elevator dinged. Someone was coming up. He lived alone. No one should have access. The hallway outside his door echoed with soft footsteps. Knock. Low. Measured. Rhythmic. Nathaniel grabbed a letter opener. "Who's there?" Silence. He moved to the peephole. No one. But when he turned around, Rebecca stood in his living room. This time she looked real. Not ghostly. Not flickering. Just tired. "Make it stop," he whispered. "What do you want from me?" She tilted her head. "Don't you recognize it, Nathaniel? You're not in your world anymore." He backed up. "What does that mean?" "This version of reality. A loop. Trial. A punishment." "No. I'm alive." "Are you?" she asked gently. "When you fainted at the clinic, you didn't wake up." "Not really. You crossed into a different space. One built from your own guilt." He dropped to his knees. "Please." "Sorry. I didn't know." "You chose not to know." The room melted around them. His penthouse morphed into a hospital ward. The walls bled. Machines screamed. He was back. Strapped to the table. Rebecca stood over him with a scalpel. And beside her stood himself. The other Nathaniel looked down with pity. "You created me, you know," the twin said. "When you cast her out. When you ignored the truth." Rebecca handed the scalpel to the twin. He pressed it to Nathaniel's chest. "You see, in here, everyone gets justice. And in your world, justice was never served." Nathaniel thrashed. "I can fix it. I can. But you're too late." Rebecca whispered something ancient, and a circle of dark fire appeared around the bed. The room shook. The walls collapsed. From the flames, hands reached out, grasping, pulling. Nathaniel screamed as he was dragged into the dark. He woke up in bed. Again. Sunlight streamed through the window. Was it over? Had it all been a dream? He stumbled to the kitchen, turned on the TV. A news anchor talked about market crashes, layoffs. His company was collapsing without him. His phone buzzed. Message. "Do better this time." He dropped it. Looked around. Rebecca was gone. But her voice whispered from nowhere. "There's still time. If you remember." He stared out the window. The world looked normal. But for the first time, he didn't trust what he saw. Nathaniel sat motionless in the sunlight, clutching the phone in his hand, the final message still glowing on the screen. "Do better this time." His apartment seemed quiet. Too quiet. He reached for the TV remote again, half expecting it to spark or scream. But it worked. Channels flipped. News, sitcoms, weather reports. Normal. Too normal. But then came the commercial. A short 30-second ad for St. Aurelia's Clinic. That place. The same logo. The same red cross twisting into a spiral. A soft voice narrated. "At St. Aurelia's, we give you a second chance, if you're brave enough to remember what you've forgotten." Nathaniel's blood went cold. That clinic had burned down. He Googled it. St. Aurelia's Clinic. Closed since 1997 due to fire. 36 confirmed dead. He read the article mouth dry. The photo showed ashes and rubble. But he had been there. Recently. He remembered the four. The walls. The nurse. Rebecca. Nathaniel didn't sleep that night. The voices were louder now. Not whispers anymore, but rhythmic chants from unseen mouths. They came from his bedroom mirror. From the vents. From the walls. "Remember. Remember. Remember." He finally gave in. He had to go back. Back to St. Aurelia's. Back to the place where everything went wrong. He drove through the night. The road was empty, the GPS glitching every few miles. He wasn't sure if he was even going in the right direction, until the road ended at a rusted gate with a faded sign. St. Aurelia's Clinic. Closed. No trespassing. He stepped out of the car. The air was thick, like syrup. The world had no sound, just windless silence and a strange pressure in the air. He stepped through the broken gate. And the moment he did, the clinic reappeared. Lights flickered on in the windows. The scent of antiseptic and burning flesh filled his lungs. It was like time folded and the ruins turned whole. Nathaniel stepped into the lobby. It was exactly as he remembered. The cracked tiles, the humming lights, the front desk with a faded phone. Except this time no one greeted him. He walked forward, each step echoing like thunder in his ears. The hallway extended longer than it should have. He turned a corner. A room labeled, records. He entered. Inside, files lined the walls, thousands of them. Yellowed paper. Blood-stained folders. All organized alphabetically. His fingers shook as he searched for Rebecca Lang. He found it. Opened it. The top sheet was a death certificate. Rebecca Lang, Biddy. October 30th, 1997. Cause of death. Fire. 90% burns. No remains recovered. His breath caught in his throat. He flipped the page. There was a photo of her in a nurse's uniform. Next to it, a handwritten note. Accused of tampering with patient meds. Said she was trying to protect them from something inside the walls. More pages. More scribbled warnings. Voices at night. Equipment moving on its own. Rebecca kept claiming the clinic was feeding on patients' memories. He stumbled back, the room spinning. She had died here. She had warned them. They hadn't listened. And now, she was back. Nathaniel wandered through the clinic, guided by the flickering exit signs that led nowhere. Eventually he came to a locked door labeled, "Basement, authorized personnel only." But the door creaked open for him, as if it had been waiting. The stairs were steep, winding down into choking darkness. He descended, each step colder than the last. At the bottom, he found a massive iron chamber. Inside there were gurneys, burned bones, 4 poles crusted with black ash, scratched symbols on the walls in blood, and in the center a mirror. Not a normal one. It shimmered like liquid mercury, pulsed. Rebecca stood on the other side. Not a reflection. Another Rebecca. She stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "You left me," she whispered. "I didn't know. You chose not to." She pointed to the mirror. "This is the door. Your punishment lies behind it. But so does your truth." Nathaniel stepped closer. "Why me?" "Because you watched people burn and you said nothing. You let corruption rot your company, and silenced those who warned you. You fired the one person who tried to save it all." His throat closed. "What do I have to do?" The days passed. Nathaniel pretended life had returned to normal. He returned to work. The board congratulated him on turning a new leaf. His inbox was flooded with appreciation, deals, praise. People began calling him compassionate, a visionary. But every night when the world was quiet, he saw her, Rebecca, sometimes just a shadow in a mirror, sometimes standing in the corner of his room, her nurse's uniform stitched with blood. He stopped sleeping. He stopped pretending. Because Nathaniel finally understood. He hadn't escaped anything. He was still inside it. One rainy morning, Nathaniel took the elevator down from his penthouse. He pressed lobby, but the elevator stopped at B1, a floor that didn't exist. The doors opened to a long white hallway, humming with fluorescent light. And at the end of it, Rebecca waited. He didn't ask how or why. He just walked. When he reached her, she handed him a file. His name was written on the cover. Inside a single page. Patient number 001. Nathaniel Cross. Status: unresolved. Diagnosis: willful amnesia. Repeating loop. Unwilling to accept culpability. He looked up at her, throat tightening. "Is this purgatory?" Rebecca didn't answer. Instead, she opened a door beside them. Inside was a hospital room. The same room he had woken up in after fainting. But this time he saw himself lying in the bed. Eyes closed. Monitors beeping. "For dripping," Rebecca whispered. "You never woke up." Nathaniel staggered back, heart racing. "I remember waking up. I left the clinic. I fixed everything." Rebecca shook her head. "No, that was your mind's version of waking up. A dream you created to avoid truth." She stepped closer. "This place isn't just a clinic. It's a reflection. A prison for those who refuse to take responsibility." Nathaniel trembled. "But I did. I changed." "You imagine change. But deep inside you still think you're the victim." He wanted to scream, to fight her, but her eyes softened. She took his hand. "You still have one last chance." A blinding white light filled the room. He was back. Not in the real world, but a courtroom. Rebecca stood as the prosecutor. A jury of shadows watched from the benches. "Nathaniel Cross," she said, her voice cold. "You are charged with negligent leadership, the firing of whistleblowers, turning a blind eye to suffering, the destruction of 36 lives in the Street Aurelia fire, and the psychological entrapment of your own soul." The shadows whispered his name like a chant. Nathaniel stood frozen. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know." A gavel slammed. Intent doesn't matter, Rebecca said. Action does. Then what can I do? He begged. How do I end this? She raised a single trembling finger toward the exit door. Walk through it. Nathaniel stepped forward. Each step burned his feet, his soul. Memories flooded him. Every cruel decision, every ignored email, every warning silenced for profit. By the time he reached the door, he was sobbing. I'm sorry, he whispered. And for once, he meant it. Nathaniel's eyes fluttered open. In the real hospital, doctors surrounded him, gasping. He's awake, one shouted. Another. He's been in a coma for 2 years. Nathaniel blinked, disoriented. His muscles ached. His mind felt scorched. They ran tests, called family. Press conferences followed. But Nathaniel didn't care. He had only one request. Find her. Find Rebecca Lang. The nurse looked puzzled. Sir, there's no nurse here by that name. He insisted. The records were checked. No Rebecca. No trace of her ever working there. Months later, Nathaniel left his company for good. He donated everything, his fortune, properties, stocks. Established real clinics for the poor under the Lang Foundation. He lived in a modest apartment. Alone. He spoke at public events about corporate cruelty, ethics, and the cost of silence. People praised him, loved him, but he never smiled. Not really. Because every time he looked into a mirror, he saw Rebecca, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, sometimes whispering. This time, you chose better. And yet sometimes, he wondered if he was still asleep, still trapped, still burning in that hallway under the clinic, forever trying to wake up.